The cross burned white-hot against Hazel's palm, but she couldn't let go. Her fingers had fused to the ancient silver, smoke rising from where metal met flesh. And the high court of the bloodline tribunal watched with satisfaction twisting their pale, perfect faces. She stood in the center of the obsidian chamber, dawn light filtering through the eastern windows in golden shafts that would soon flood the entire room, and every vampire in attendance knew exactly what that meant. "Confess!" Magistrate Octavia demanded from her elevated throne, her crimson gown pooling around her like spilled blood. "Confess that you are Dampier filth, born of forbidden union, and I will grant you a swift execution before the sun completes its rise." Hazel's knees trembled, but she forced herself to remain standing. The cross had been thrust into her hands 60 seconds ago as proof of her humanity, a test every servant in the vampire territories underwent when accused of hiding mixed blood. Humans could hold the blessed silver without consequence. Dampiers burned. Pure vampires would have recoiled before ever making contact. But Hazel's skin had done something else entirely. The cross had melted into her palm, becoming part of her, and now it glowed with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her racing heart. "I don't know what I am," Hazel whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs rippling through the assembled nobles. "I was raised in the human quarter. My parents were human. They died of fever when I was 12, and I've served in the palace kitchens ever since. I'm 23 years old, and I've never once stepped into sunlight without pain. I thought that was normal. I thought everyone felt that way." "Lies," hissed Magistrate Octavia, her black eyes glittering with barely contained rage. She had been the one to accuse Hazel 3 days ago, had personally dragged her from the kitchens and thrown her into the holding cells beneath the palace. "You have deceived us for over a decade, walking among us, listening to our private conversations, learning our weaknesses. You are a spy for the resistance, sent to infiltrate the palace and assassinate our king." "I've never even seen the king," Hazel protested, even as the first true rays of dawn touched the edge of the marble floor, creeping closer to where she stood. "I work in the scullery. I scrub pots. I'm nobody." "Then why does the sacred cross of St. Dominic embrace you instead of destroying you?" The voice came from the shadows at the back of the chamber, deep and resonant, carrying authority that made every vampire in the room immediately straighten in their seats. "Why does the most powerful relic of the old church, blessed by 3 popes and dipped in the blood of martyrs, fuse with your flesh as though recognizing a kindred spirit?" The nobles parted like a curtain as a figure emerged from the darkness. He was tall, easily 6.5 feet, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that burned like molten silver. He wore black from head to toe, his coat tailored to perfection, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known fear. Power radiated from him in waves that made the air itself feel heavy, oppressive, and Hazel realized, with a lurching sensation in her stomach, that she was looking at King William himself, ruler of the Eastern Bloodline Dominion and the most dangerous vampire alive. "Your Majesty," Magistrate Octavia said, dropping into a curtsy so low her forehead nearly touched her knees. "I did not expect you to attend this minor tribunal. The execution of a lying servant hardly requires your presence." "And yet here I am," William said, his gaze fixed on Hazel with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. He moved closer, circling her like a wolf studying prey, and the other vampires shrank back to give him room. "Tell me, magistrate, when did you first suspect this girl of being damp here?" 3 days ago, your majesty. I witnessed her speaking with Tobias, the stablemaster, in a corridor where she should not have been. When I questioned her, she became defensive and evasive. I knew immediately that she was hiding something." "You knew immediately," William repeated, his tone flat. "Based on a conversation with a stablemaster, in a corridor. And your solution was to accuse her of being both Dampier and a spy for the Resistance. 2 claims that generally contradict each other, since the Resistance despises mixed bloods as much as they despise pure vampires." Octavia's perfect composure flickered for just a moment. "I merely sought to uncover the truth, your majesty." "By scheduling her execution for dawn, during a tribunal where I was conveniently out of the capital on diplomatic matters." William stopped directly in front of Hazel, so close she could feel the cold radiating from his body like standing near an open freezer. "By using the sacred cross, which has not been removed from its vault in 200 years. Tell me, magistrate, how did you gain access to the relic chambers? Those doors can only be opened by the king or his direct bloodline." The silence that fell over the chamber was absolute. Every noble seemed to have stopped breathing. Magistrate Octavia's face had gone from pale to ashen, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "Your brother granted me access," she said finally, lifting her chin in defiance. "Prince Vincent believed, as I do, that security threats must be neutralized swiftly. My brother is not authorized to open the relic chambers," William said softly, dangerously. "He knows this. You know this. Which means you convinced him to commit treason, used the sacred cross without permission, and arranged an execution that violated at least 7 different protocols of vampire law, all to kill a kitchen servant you claim is both spy and Dampier." He tilted his head, studying Octavia the way a scientist might study a particularly interesting specimen. "Why would you go to such lengths? What is this girl to you?" "She is an abomination," Octavia spat, her composure finally cracking completely. "Look at her! The cross has fused to her skin, and she still lives. She stands in the approaching dawn without fear. She is not human, not vampire, not even Dampier. She is something else entirely, something that should not exist." William's hand shot out faster than Hazel could track, gripping Octavia's throat and lifting her off the ground with one arm. The magistrate clawed at his wrist, her eyes wide with terror, and he held her there, suspended in the air as casually as someone might hold a piece of paper. "You fear her," William said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "You fear what she represents, and so you tried to murder her before anyone could discover the truth." He released Octavia, letting her crumple to the floor, gasping, and turned back to Hazel. "Give me your hand, the one holding the cross." Hazel extended her trembling hand, the cross still embedded in her palm, still glowing with that strange inner light. William took her hand in both of his touch shockingly cold, and examined where metal had become flesh. His expression showed nothing, but Hazel felt something pass between them the moment his skin made contact with hers. A recognition, a spark of something ancient and powerful that had been sleeping until this exact moment. "You are not Dampier," William said, his silver eyes meeting hers. "Dampiers burn and die when they touch blessed silver. You are not human." He turned her hand over, revealing that the cross had not just fused with her palm, but had somehow integrated into her entire circulatory system. Faint silver lines now visible beneath her skin, tracing up her wrist and forearm like veins of light. And you are not vampire, though you clearly have our sensitivity to dawn. Then what am I? Hazel whispered, fear and confusion warring in her chest. You are Lumenborn, said an aged voice from the gallery above. An elderly vampire descended the stairs, leaning on a gnarled wooden staff, his face creased with centuries of life. I never thought I would see one in my lifetime. I had believed the bloodline extinct. Explain, Counselor Matthias, William commanded, though his hands remained gentle on Hazel's, as if afraid she might shatter. The old vampire reached the floor and approached slowly, studying Hazel with wonder in his ancient eyes. 1,500 years ago, before the Great Schism, there existed a vampire bloodline that could walk in daylight. They were called the Lumenborn, the Daywalkers, and they served as protectors of sacred places. They could touch blessed objects without harm because they themselves were blessed, chosen by powers older than our kind to serve as bridges between darkness and light. He gestured to Hazel's hand. The sacred cross recognizes her for what she is. It has bonded with her because she is its rightful guardian. That's impossible, Octavia said from the floor, struggling to her feet. The Lumenborn were all killed during the Purge. The Church hunted them to extinction because they were seen as abominations by both humans and vampires. Nearly to extinction, Matthias corrected. Clearly, some survived. They hid among humans, suppressed their abilities, and over generations the knowledge of what they were was lost. He looked at Hazel with something like pity. The pain you felt in sunlight was not because it harmed you, child. It was because your body was trying to awaken abilities you didn't know you possessed, and the effort caused you suffering. Hazel felt the world tilting beneath her feet. The dawn light had reached her now, golden sunshine spilling across her shoulders, and instead of the burning agony she had always experienced, there was only warmth. Gentle, pleasant warmth. The cross in her palm pulsed brighter, and the silver veins beneath her skin began to glow in response. No, Octavia said, backing away. No, this cannot be allowed. If the Lumenborn return, they will upset the entire balance of power. They will what, magistrate? William's voice cut through her panic like a blade. Provide protection against the very resistance you claim to fear? Serve as guards for our sacred places that currently stand vulnerable? Bridge the gap between our kind and the humans we need to coexist with? He released Hazel's hand and turned to face Octavia fully. Or are you worried they will expose vampires who have been abusing their power, stealing from the treasury and conspiring with my brother to undermine my rule? Octavia's face went from white to gray. Your Majesty, I have always been loyal. You tried to execute an innocent girl to cover up whatever schemes you and Vincent have been plotting, William said coldly. You violated sacred law by entering the relic chambers without authorization. You called an illegal tribunal during my absence. He looked around at the assembled nobles, his silver eyes burning with barely contained fury. I want a full investigation into Magistrate Octavia's activities for the past 10 years. Every transaction, every meeting, every whispered conversation. And I want my brother brought to me in chains. Your Majesty, one of the nobles ventured nervously, Prince Vincent has already fled the capital. His household emptied 3 hours ago, and his personal guard went with him. William's jaw tightened, but he merely nodded. Then we hunt him. As for you, magistrate, you will spend the rest of your very long life in the deep cells, where sunlight never reaches and silence is absolute." He gestured, and 2 guards appeared from the shadows to seize Octavia's arms. She struggled, her fangs extending, but William moved faster than thought and gripped her jaw in one hand, his strength overwhelming. "If you resist, I will end you here and now. If you go quietly, you live. Choose." Octavia went limp, and the guards dragged her away, her perfect crimson gown trailing behind her like a river of blood. The other nobles remained frozen in place, clearly terrified they might be next. William turned back to Hazel, and his expression softened in a way that made him look almost human. "Can you walk? Or do you need a moment to adjust?" "I can walk," Hazel said, though her legs felt like water. The cross had stopped glowing quite so brightly, but it remained part of her palm, a permanent addition to her flesh. "Your Majesty, I don't understand what's happening. An hour ago, I was a kitchen servant. Now I'm apparently some kind of extinct vampire variant, and you're defending me against your own court." "An hour ago, you were already Lumenborn," William corrected. "You simply didn't know it." He offered her his arm in a gesture that would have been courtly under normal circumstances, but felt surreal given that she was still wearing her stained kitchen smock. "Come, we have much to discuss, and this chamber will soon be unbearable for everyone except you." Hazel took his arm because she didn't know what else to do, and together they walked toward the eastern doors, where dawn light streamed in with increasing intensity. The assembled nobles shrank back from the windows, hissing and covering their faces, but Hazel walked through the sunshine as though it were nothing more than air. It felt glorious. It felt like coming home after a lifetime of exile. They emerged onto a balcony overlooking the capital city, and Hazel gasped. She had never seen the world in daylight before, not truly. The city sprawled beneath them in shades of gold and amber, the river cutting through its center like a ribbon of light, and in the distance, mountains rose purple against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. It was beautiful. It was overwhelming. Tears streamed down her face without permission. "I never knew," she whispered. "I never knew it could look like this." William stood beside her in the shadow of the doorway, the sunlight stopping exactly at the threshold, as though it knew better than to touch him. 1,500 years ago, my ancestor signed the treaty that led to the purge of your people. He believed they were a threat to vampire sovereignty. He was wrong, and thousands died because of his fear. His voice carried a weight of old grief. "I cannot undo what was done, but I can ensure it never happens again." Hazel turned to face him, wiping at her tears. "Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I'm nobody." "You are Lumenborn," William said simply. "You are one of the rarest beings in existence, born with abilities that could change everything for both our peoples. And beyond that," he hesitated, something flickering in his silver eyes that looked almost vulnerable. "When I touched your hand in there, I felt something I have not felt in 400 years. A bond. A connection that goes deeper than blood or politics or duty." "What kind of connection?" Hazel asked, her heart beginning to race again. "The kind that is forbidden for a king to acknowledge without proper ceremony," William said, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "The kind that requires at least 3 formal courtship rituals and approval from the Council of Elders before it can be spoken aloud." His smile faded, replaced by an expression of fierce protectiveness. "But I will tell you this, Hazel of the Lumenborn. No one will harm you while I draw breath. No one will call you abomination or filth. You are under my personal protection, and any who challenge that will answer to me." Before Hazel could respond, a commotion erupted from inside the palace. Shouts, the clash of weapons, and a woman's scream cut through the morning air. William spun toward the sound, his body tensing for violence, and Hazel followed him back through the doorway into the shadowed halls. They found chaos in the throne room. Prince Vincent had not fled after all. He stood at the center of a circle of armed guards, his pale face twisted with rage, and he held a struggling figure in his arms. A girl, no more than 10 years old, with honey-colored hair and tear-stained cheeks. She wore the simple gray dress of the palace orphans, children who had lost parents to disease or violence and were raised in the palace creche. "Brother," Vincent said, his voice dripping with false pleasantry, "how lovely of you to join us. I was just collecting insurance for my departure." "Release the child, Vincent," William said, his tone deadly calm. "Release her, and I will allow you to leave the capital unharmed." "I think not," Vincent replied. "You see, I have spent 5 years building alliances with human kingdoms who are tired of vampire rule. I have promised them that I will bring a new age, one where humans and vampires are equals, not masters and servants." He tightened his grip on the girl, making her whimper. "But I cannot do that with you on the throne. You are too powerful, too respected. So I need leverage." "That child is not leverage," William said, taking a step forward. "She is an innocent who has done nothing to you." "She is leverage if you care about innocent lives," Vincent countered. "And I know you do, dear brother. It is your greatest weakness." His eyes shifted to Hazel, standing beside William, and his expression twisted with disgust. "I see you have found the abomination. How touching. Will you make her your queen? Parade her before the court as proof of your progressive values? Or will you realize, as I have, that she is a threat to everything we have built?" "She is not a threat," William said. "You are." Vincent laughed, a brittle sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Then prove it. Choose. Chase me now, and I will kill this child before you reach me. Let me go, and she lives. What will it be, Your Majesty?" Hazel felt something stirring inside her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sunlight, streaming through the eastern windows. The cross in her palm pulsed once, twice, and the silver veins beneath her skin began to glow brighter. She looked at the terrified child in Vincent's arms, at William's face carved from stone with barely suppressed rage. And she made a decision. "Let me try something," she said quietly. "Hazel, no!" William started, but she was already moving, walking forward with her glowing hand extended. The light from the cross grew brighter with each step, pushing back shadows, and Vincent's guards stumbled backward with hisses of pain as the radiance touched them. "Stay back, abomination!" Vincent snarled, but his voice wavered. "I will break this child's neck." "No," Hazel said simply. "You won't." She reached out and touched Vincent's arm with her free hand, the one not fused with the cross, and the effect was instantaneous. Silver light erupted from the point of contact, racing up Vincent's arm and spreading across his entire body like wildfire. He screamed and released the child, who scrambled away into the arms of a waiting servant. Vincent fell to his knees, clawing at his skin as the light burrowed deeper. "What are you doing to me?" he gasped, his perfect face contorting with agony. "I honestly don't know," Hazel admitted, watching in fascination as the silver light seemed to be burning away something dark and oily that clung to Vincent's aura like smoke. But whatever you have been doing, whatever darkness you have been playing with, it does not belong in you." The light intensified one final time, and then Vincent collapsed completely, unconscious but breathing. The darkness was gone, burned away by whatever power Hazel had unleashed, and in its wake, Vincent looked smaller somehow, less imposing, as though a mask had been stripped away to reveal the frightened man beneath. William moved to Hazel's side immediately, his hand on her shoulder. "Are you harmed?" "No," Hazel said, staring at her hands. Both of them now glowed faintly, the cross acting as a conduit for something much larger. "I think I just purified him. I didn't know I could do that." Counselor Matthias appeared from the crowd that had gathered, his ancient face alight with wonder. Purification was one of the Lumenborn's greatest gifts. They could burn away corruption, break dark enchantments, cleanse cursed places. He bowed deeply to Hazel. "My lady, you have just proven beyond doubt what you are. The cross chose well." William's guards secured the unconscious Vincent, while others rounded up his co-conspirators among the palace staff. The little girl Vincent had threatened was being comforted by nurses from the creche, and slowly, order began to restore itself to the chaos. But William did not move from Hazel's side, his hand still resting on her shoulder as though afraid she might vanish if he let go. "You saved that child's life," he said softly. "You stopped Vincent without killing him, which is more mercy than he deserved." "I didn't want anyone else to die because of me," Hazel replied, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her in waves. "There has been enough death." "Come," William said, guiding her away from the throne room and into a private corridor. "You need rest, and food, and about 1,000 explanations that I do not currently have the answers to." He paused at a doorway that led to a suite of rooms Hazel had only ever seen from the outside while delivering firewood. "These will be your quarters. They are warded with protection spells older than the palace itself, and my own chambers are directly above. No one will enter without your permission." Hazel looked around the suite in stunned silence. It was larger than the entire kitchen dormitory where she had spent the last decade. Tapestries covered the walls, plush carpets muffled every footstep, and a massive bed dominated one wall, its posts carved with intricate designs of vines and flowers. A set of glass doors opened onto a private balcony that faced east, ensuring she would have sunlight whenever she desired. "This is too much," she protested weakly. "This is nowhere near enough," William countered. "But it will suffice until we determine your proper place in this court." He moved toward the door, then hesitated, turning back to face her. "Hazel, what I said earlier, on the balcony, about the bond, I meant every word. But I will not pressure you or rush you. You have had your entire life upended in a single morning. You deserve time to adjust before making any decisions about your future." "What kind of decisions?" Hazel asked, though part of her already knew the answer. William's silver eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The kind that would make you a queen. The kind that would bind your life to mine for eternity. The kind that would change both our peoples forever." He stepped closer, and Hazel could feel the cold radiating from his body, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the sunlight streaming through the glass doors. But those are conversations for later. For now, rest, recover, learn what you are and what you can become. I will have Counselor Matthias sent to you to begin your education." He left before Hazel could respond, the door closing behind him with a soft click, and she was alone in rooms that smelled of lavender and old books. She walked to the glass doors and opened them, stepping out onto the balcony where the sun fell across her face like a blessing. The cross in her palm hummed with contentment, and the silver veins beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Below, the capital city spread out in all directions, humans and vampires moving through the streets in their separate districts, living parallel lives that rarely intersected. Hazel thought about what William had said, about bridges between darkness and light, about changing both peoples forever. And she realized that whether she wanted it or not, she had become the bridge. The question was, what she would choose to build across it. The next weeks passed in a blur of revelations and discoveries. Counselor Matthias arrived each morning to teach Hazel about the Lumenborn, sharing ancient texts written in languages she somehow found herself able to read once she touched the pages. She learned that her people had not always been vampire variants at all. They had started as humans chosen by something the old text called the First Light, blessed with the ability to stand against darkness while bearing no darkness within themselves. Over centuries, they had interbred with vampires who sought to protect them, creating a hybrid species that carried the strengths of both bloodlines, with none of the weaknesses. She learned that Lumenborn could walk in sunlight because their blood carried traces of the First Light, a form of sacred energy that predated both humanity and vampires. They could touch blessed objects because they themselves were blessed, and they could purify corruption because corruption could not survive in their presence, any more than shadow could survive the dawn. But most importantly, she learned that she was not alone. The old records suggested that others might have survived, scattered across the world, hiding among humans and never knowing what they truly were. If she could find them, if she could gather them together, they might restore a bloodline that had been thought extinct for 15 centuries. William visited her every evening, always precisely at sunset when he could move freely through the palace. He brought her books from his private library, maps of territories where other Lumenborn might be hiding, and occasionally, he simply sat with her on the balcony and talked about everything and nothing. He told her about the burden of kingship, about the constant pressure to appear strong and infallible when he often felt neither. He confessed that he had never expected to feel the bond that thrummed between them every time they touched, that in 400 years of existence, he had believed himself incapable of that particular vulnerability. And Hazel found herself falling for him in increments. Not because he was a king, though his power was undeniable. Not because he had saved her from execution, though she owed him her life. She fell for him because he listened when she spoke about her fears. Because he never once made her feel less than him, despite the vast gap in their ages and experience. Because when she woke screaming from nightmares about burning at the stake, he was there in her doorway within seconds, asking permission to enter rather than assuming he had the right. "The bond," she said one evening as they sat on her balcony watching the last traces of sunset fade to night. "Counselor Matthias says it is rare even among Lumenborn, that it only forms between those who are perfectly matched in power and purpose." "Matthias has always had a romantic streak," William replied, though his tone was gentle rather than dismissive. "But yes, the bond is rare. It means our souls recognize each other. It means that if we completed the binding ceremony, we would be connected in ways that transcend blood or magic. We would feel each other's emotions, share each other's strengths, and exist as two halves of one whole." "That sounds terrifying," Hazel admitted. It is, William agreed. It means complete vulnerability. No secrets, no shields, no distance between souls. For someone like me, who has spent centuries building walls to protect myself, the idea of dismantling them is... He trailed off, searching for words. Terrifying, Hazel finished for him, and he smiled. Yes, but also the most compelling thing I have ever encountered. He turned to face her fully, his silver eyes reflecting the first stars. I will not lie to you, Hazel. If we complete the bond, you will become a target. Every enemy I have will see you as a weapon to use against me. Every political rival will try to manipulate you to undermine my rule. And Vincent, wherever he is hiding, will see you as the ultimate prize to capture or destroy. Vincent, Hazel said, the name leaving a bitter taste. Have your hunters found any trace of him? William's expression darkened. No, he vanished completely after you purified him. But I have received reports of a new movement gathering in the Western Territories. They call themselves the Dusk Covenant, and they preach that vampires and humans should never mix, that any hybrid species is an abomination against nature. His jaw tightened. Vincent was always good at propaganda. Then he will come for me eventually, Hazel said, surprised at how calm she felt about the prospect. Because I represent everything he hates. He will come for both of us, William corrected, but he will find us ready. The attack came 3 months later, on the night of the autumn equinox when the court gathered for its annual celebration. Hazel had been officially recognized as Lumenborn before the assembled nobles, and while many remained wary of her, none dared challenge William's declaration that she was under royal protection. She wore a gown of silver and white that Counselor Matthias had commissioned, its fabric woven with threads that caught the light and made her seem to glow even without her powers active. The cross remained fused to her palm, visible for all to see, a permanent mark of what she was. The celebration was in full swing, nobles dancing in the great hall while musicians played from the galleries above, when the eastern windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and moonlight. Figures poured through the openings, dozens of them, wearing the black and gray of the Dusk Covenant and wielding weapons blessed by corrupted priests. They moved with military precision, clearly trained and prepared, and at their head walked Prince Vincent. He had changed since Hazel last saw him. The purification had burned away whatever dark power he had been using, but it had also left him gaunt and hollow-eyed, as though something essential had been carved out of his soul. He wore armor instead of courtly finery, and the sword in his hand dripped with a substance that smoked when it touched the air. "Brother," Vincent called out over the screams and chaos, "I have returned to claim what is mine." William was in front of Hazel before Vincent finished speaking, his own blade appearing in his hand as though summoned from shadow. "You claim nothing, Vincent. You are exiled by royal decree. Leave now, and I will let your followers live." "Always so merciful," Vincent sneered. "That is why you are weak. That is why you allow abominations like her to exist in our midst." He pointed his smoking blade at Hazel. "But I will correct your mistakes. I will purge this court of all corruption, starting with the creature who has bewitched you." "She has bewitched no one," William said, his voice dropping to a register that made the air itself vibrate with power. "She is Lumenborn, chosen by forces older than our bloodline, and you will show her respect, or I will end you here and now." "Then end me," Vincent challenged. "Strike down your own brother in front of the entire court. Show them what a monster you have become." William hesitated for just a fraction of a second, and that was all the opening Vincent needed. He surged forward with inhuman speed, his poison blade aimed not at William, but at Hazel. William moved to intercept, but 3 of Vincent's soldiers threw themselves in his path, sacrificing themselves to buy Vincent time. Hazel felt time slow to a crawl. She saw Vincent's blade coming toward her heart, saw the triumph in his eyes, saw the horror on William's face as he tried desperately to reach her. And she felt the cross in her palm explode with light. The sacred cross of St. Dominic had been forged 1,500 years ago to destroy evil, and it recognized Vincent's poisoned blade as exactly that. Light erupted from Hazel's hand in a wave that swept across the entire hall, so bright that vampires screamed and covered their faces, so pure that Vincent's blade shattered in his hand like rotten wood. The light found every member of the Dust Covenant and burned away the corruption that clung to them, leaving them gasping on the floor, purged of the dark magic that had enhanced their abilities. Vincent himself took the full force of the purification at point-blank range. He flew backward as though struck by a battering ram, crashed through a marble column, and lay still in the rubble. The light faded slowly, leaving Hazel standing alone in the center of the hall, her hand still raised, silver veins blazing beneath her skin like rivers of starlight. The assembled nobles stared at her in stunned silence. Then, one by one, they began to kneel. William reached her first, his hands framing her face, his silver eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. "Are you harmed? Did his blade touch you?" "No," Hazel whispered, her voice shaking with the aftermath of so much power. "The cross protected me." "The cross protected all of us," Counselor Matthias said, approaching slowly with his staff clicking on the marble. "My lady, you have just demonstrated why the Lumenborn were revered as sacred guardians. You purified 20 corrupted souls in a single burst of power. Such a feat has not been witnessed since the old days." William pulled Hazel against his chest, and she could feel his heart racing despite his external calm. "You could have been killed if the cross had not responded in time." "But it did," Hazel interrupted gently. "It will always respond when I am threatened. That is what it means to be chosen." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "William, we need to talk about the bond, about what happens next." "Not here," William said immediately. "Not in front of the entire court with my brother's unconscious body 20 feet away." He raised his voice, addressing the room. "The threat is ended. Guards, secure Vincent and his followers. They will be judged according to the law." He looked down at Hazel, his expression softening. "Come, we have much to discuss." He led her through corridors emptied by the attack, upstairs that wound through the oldest part of the palace until they reached a tower she had never seen before. At its summit was a circular room with windows on all sides, offering a view of the entire capital and the mountains beyond. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the eastern sky in shades of gold and rose. "This was built by the first vampire king as a place of meditation," William said, closing the door behind them. Sunrise always reaches here first. It is the one place in the palace where I can never go during the day." "Then why bring me here?" Hazel asked. "Because I want you to see it," William said simply. "I want you to stand in the light and know that you can, that you will never again have to hide in shadows or pretend to be less than what you are." He moved to stand at the western window, where the last traces of night still clung to the sky. "And because I want to ask you something, and I need you to see my face clearly when I do." Hazel's heart began to race. "What do you want to ask?" William turned to face her, and in the growing dawn light, she could see every detail of his expression. The vulnerability there, the hope, the fear. "I want to complete the bond. I want to bind my life to yours for whatever time we have, whether that is centuries or mere decades. I want to make you my queen in truth, not just in title. And I want to rebuild this kingdom together." He took a breath. "But more than any of that, I want to know you. Every thought, every dream, every fear. I want the connection we touched that first day to become permanent." "That sounds like a proposal," Hazel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is," William confirmed. "I am asking you to marry me, to bond with me, to rule beside me as equal, not subject." He crossed the space between them in 2 strides and took her hands in his, careful of the cross still embedded in her palm. "I am asking you to take a chance on a vampire king who has lived 400 years without feeling what I feel when I look at you. And I am asking, knowing full well that you have every reason to say no. You barely know me. You did not ask for any of this. You were dragged into my world against your will and forced to become something you never chose to be." "That's all true," Hazel agreed, watching the sunrise paint his face in shades of gold that would soon drive him back into shadow. "But you are forgetting something important." "What am I forgetting?" "That I have felt the bond too," Hazel said. "Every time you touch me, every time we talk, every moment we are in the same room, I feel it, like a string connecting my heart to yours, like I am incomplete when you are not near." She raised her free hand to touch his face, and his eyes fluttered closed at the contact. "I am terrified, William. I am terrified of being queen, of having an entire kingdom look to me for guidance when I barely understand what I am. I am terrified of the enemies we will face and the battles we will have to fight. But I am more terrified of walking away from this and spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." William's eyes opened, silver meeting green in the growing light. "Is that a yes?" "That is a yes," Hazel confirmed. "With one condition." "Name it." "We find the other Lumenborn," Hazel said. "We search every corner of this world until we locate anyone else who carries this bloodline, and we bring them home. We give them the choice to embrace what they are or continue living as they were. But we at least give them the choice." She tightened her grip on his hands. "I do not want to be the last of my kind. I want to build something that will outlive both of us." "Then that is what we will do," William promised. "Together." The binding ceremony took place 3 months later, on the winter solstice when night was longest and the stars burned brightest. By vampire tradition, it should have been held at midnight in the heart of darkness. But William had ordered it moved to dawn specifically so that Hazel could stand in sunlight while she took her vows. The entire court gathered on the palace's eastern terrace, nobles wrapped in furs against the winter cold, and watched as their king stood in shadow while his bride stood in light. Counselor Matthias performed the ritual, speaking words in the old tongue that had not been used for bonding ceremonies in 500 years. Hazel wore silver and white, her hair unbound and crowned with winter roses, the sacred cross visible in her palm where it pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. William wore black velvet and ancient armor, every inch the warrior king. And when he spoke his vows, his voice carried across the entire terrace with perfect clarity. I pledge to you my strength, my power, and my throne. I pledge to defend you with every breath and honor you with every action. I pledge to build with you a kingdom where light and shadow exist in harmony. And I pledge that your enemies will become mine, your dreams will become mine, and your life will become the purpose for which I continue to exist. Hazel felt tears streaming down her face as she spoke her own vows. I pledge to you my light, my power, and my loyalty. I pledge to stand beside you in darkness and never let you face it alone. I pledge to build with you a future worth fighting for, and I pledge that your battles will become mine, your burdens will become mine, and your life will become the reason I embrace what I am. Matthias took both their hands and bound them together with silver cord that glowed the moment it touched their skin. By the ancient laws and the new, by darkness and by light, by blood and by bond, I declare you bound for all eternity. Let no force in this world or the next sever what has been joined here. The moment the words left his mouth, Hazel felt something shift deep in her chest. It was like a door opening, a wall crumbling, and suddenly she could feel William as though he existed inside her own skin. His strength, his determination, his fierce protectiveness, and underneath it all, his love for her so vast and deep it made her knees weak. And she knew without asking that he felt her in return. Her courage, her compassion, her stubborn refusal to give up even when terrified, and her love for him that had grown from a spark to a wildfire. I feel you, William whispered, his voice thick with wonder. I feel everything. So do I, Hazel replied, laughing through her tears. It is overwhelming and perfect, and I never want it to stop. William pulled her into his arms and kissed her as the sun broke fully over the mountains, bathing them both in golden light that made her glow and him retreat further into the shadow of a pillar. But their hands remained joined, bound by silver cord and something far stronger, and the court erupted into applause that echoed across the entire capital. That afternoon, as Hazel stood on her private balcony watching the city celebrate below, William appeared in the doorway wrapped in the heavy cloak he used to protect himself from stray sunlight. He moved to stand just inside the shadow, as close as he could get to her without stepping into the light, and she turned to face him with a smile. I have a wedding gift for you, William said, producing a scroll sealed with royal wax. Vincent will stand trial in 3 days for treason, attempted murder, and conspiracy to overthrow the crown. But I wanted you to decide his sentence. Hazel took the scroll but did not open it. What are my options? Execution, exile, or imprisonment, William listed. The law is clear on the punishment for his crimes, but you are the one he tried to kill. You have the right to choose. Hazel thought about Vincent, the hollow look in his eyes after she had purified him, about the desperation that had driven him to corruption in the first place. She thought about mercy and justice and the delicate balance between them. "I choose purification," she said finally. "Again, and deeper this time. I will burn away every trace of corruption in his soul until there is nothing left but the man he was before ambition twisted him. And then I will give him a choice. He can accept his crimes, serve a sentence in exile where he can do no further harm, and potentially earn his way back into society. Or he can refuse and accept execution instead. But I will not let him be a martyr for the Dusk Covenant. I will not give them a murdered prince to rally behind." William studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You will be a better queen than I ever imagined. Not because you show mercy, but because you show wisdom." He pulled her close, mindful of the sunlight between them. "I love you, Hazel of the Lumenborn, my queen, my light, my bond." "I love you, William of the Dark Court," Hazel replied. "My king, my shadow, my forever." They stood there together as the sun tracked across the sky, light and darkness existing side by side, and below them the capital celebrated a union that would change both their peoples forever. The hunt for other Lumenborn would begin in spring. The rebuilding of a lost bloodline would take decades. The challenges they would face were endless and daunting, but they would face them together, bound by more than law or ceremony, united by a love that transcended the boundaries between light and dark, and determined to build a future where no one would ever again have to hide what they truly were. In her palm, the sacred cross pulsed with approval, and Hazel smiled. Did you like the story? Do you want a part 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Also, tell us which state you're watching from so I can give you a shout out in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay updated on our next uploads. Thanks for watching!